History, history. Can you see, little boy, what you mean to me? Can you see how sweet our love has long grown to be? It's time to see the happiness I feel inside of me. Knowing one thing, darling, this love will always be two lovers, history. Ain't that two lovers, history?
Welcome to episode 30 of the History Bhoys Abroad. My name is Tony. This is a Lisbon Lions special, and tonight we're going to focus exclusively on the Vojvodina Novi Sad European Cup quarter-final ties of 1967. On this episode, me and Gary were joined by Miki, a Vojvodina Novi Sad historian and fanatic, to talk about the impact this game had on his club, the players involved, the manager involved, the governmental system in the former Yugoslavia and how it impacted their growth as a club. And also, for the Celtic side, we had James from the fantastic Tweet Celtic 1967 account, which helps relive Celtic's most famous year in the form of tweets. So please give him a follow, please enjoy, and thanks for downloading. Hail, hail. So the reason that we've chosen these ties is because of the lack of notoriety that these games have received. Tommy Gemmell said the Vojvodina games were the two toughest games that he played in all his Celtic career in Europe. Billy McNeil said they were one of the biggest sides he'd ever played against and one of the most difficult opponents of that season. And Bobby Lennox also noted in his recent 20-Minute Tim's interview that they were the most difficult team that he played that season, even more difficult than the two rounds after that. So me and Gary are going to be joined today by James, who does a wonderful Twitter account. And the Twitter account, James, what's the Twitter handle for those that don't know?
It's Tweet Celtic 1967.
Right, Tweet Celtic 1967. It does exactly what it says on the tin, as it were. So basically, you started this really interesting. The reason we wanted to get you on was because, first of all, you're basically tweeting on an almost daily basis of the year of 1966 to 1967 for the entire season. Obviously, we know everything about it, but tell us a little bit about it. What made you start this Twitter account? What was the inspiration behind it?
Well, it's something that I really wanted to mark the 50th anniversary of winning the European Cup. And there was a Twitter account that I used to follow when I first got onto Twitter, and it was called Scottish Football 1983. And that kind of just put an idea in my head, and I just thought I'd love to just tweet every single day as if it was happening right now. So I started before Christmas, and it just seemed to take off from there. So
you have been doing it for... You've obviously been doing it since last year, but we are going to talk about the Vojvodina Novi Sad ties and how we basically, the reason we do this podcast is to look into sort of forgotten parts or sort of things that have not necessarily been addressed elsewhere. Speak about players that people may not know or forgotten. And the reason we've chose to do Vojvodina is because they were just seemingly a very, very strong side, and they were coming from quite a mysterious part of the world, the Eastern Bloc and Yugoslavia and things like that. So we want to also start, if you want to give us a little talk through the run that Celtic were on up until this point, because you're obviously, you probably know more about this season than we do anyway. Obviously, we are History Bhoys Abroad, but we are obviously researching as we go. Give us a little rundown of how things were day to day at Celtic.
Well, in terms of the European Cup win, the first match was in September of 1966, and it was against FC Zurich at Celtic Park. And that was a 2-0 win for Celtic. And in the return leg, which was at the beginning of October, we actually won 3-0 over in Switzerland. So then we had the second round, and that was against Nantes. And it was 2 3-1 wins. So the first 4 games that Celtic played that year, they won every match. And it seems quite strange to think, what it could be seen as an easy sort of it wasn't an easy trip to the quarterfinals, but Celtic made it easy with some fantastic displays, especially the 3-1 win over in Nantes. There was a French magazine, I think it was L'Equipe, and they thought that Celtic played football like they'd never seen before. There was a little section of the report where they said that in France they were used to plenty of movement off the ball, and the player on the ball would stop, look up, assess his options and pass. But he said that the thing that really got to them was that Celtic was this constant movement. Even the guy on the ball as well never stopped, kept moving. So they were the non team, the fans and the French press were incredibly impressed by Celtic.
Can I just ask, was there a moment in this season where, and you're doing the day-to-day research, where you probably could assume that Celtic fans thought, wait a minute, something extremely special is happening this season? Like, for example, the season we're currently in, which Celtic have just won the league, and hopefully we're going to do the treble. Like, you could almost point to like a specific game this season, maybe the Manchester City game, or even the Motherwell game where we fought back and we showed something special is brewing here. Do we have that kind of moment for the 1966-67 season?
Well, possibly. I think when you look at the results, the early results, there's an early result. It was actually in a Glasgow Cup match where we played Rangers at Ibrox, 23rd of August, and we beat Rangers 4-0, hat-trick from Bobby Lennox. And it had been quite some time since we had actually won a match at Ibrox, and I think that we really dismantled them that night. And I think that you could maybe think of it, is there obviously not thinking we're going to win the European Cup at that stage, but I think that might have been a point where something special is actually being built here.
So just to jump in there, just on a point that you made previously, you were saying that the French press were really impressed by how Celtic kind of just seemed to be non-stop running, and mix that kind of attacking flair with just a complete renowned work ethic. Is that something that at the time, when you look at kind of European football, was that something fairly new in the kind of European way of approaching the game?
I think that Jock Stein actually, he based his whole football philosophy on the Hungarian team from the 1950s. So I wouldn't say that Celtic were completely different or completely new at that time, but I think that they were recognised as being something different from the what had been sort of become normal in the previous 6 or 7 years, where the defensive football had kind of become more popular. So,
are there any players or anyone in the staff of Celtic, anyone in the background who you feel maybe deserve a little bit more of recognition? Obviously, everyone, when you think of the Lions, you see Billy McNeil, you see Bertie Auld, you see Bobby Murdoch. But are there anyone else, maybe someone in the back, someone on the bench with Jock, that probably should get more credit than they have received? Yeah,
I think possibly Neely Mochan. I think he seemed to be someone who was kind of an intermediary between the Jock Stein and the players. I think he was someone who really sort of lifted the mood at the right time, and I think he was someone who maybe was a bit of an unsung hero in the background.
Yeah. So Celtic, as you say, they started with Zurich, and then it was Nantes, and then we have a player called Joe McBride, who is someone that caught my eye. Can you tell us a little bit about Joe McBride up until the point where he got injured?
Yeah, well, I mean, Joe McBride joined Celtic the season before from Motherwell. I think it was Jock Stein's first signing after becoming manager, and he was absolutely on fire that first half of the season, 1966-67. I think he scored 31 goals, and he actually got injured in a match against Aberdeen. It was Christmas Eve at Pittodrie, and he picked up a knock in that match, and I think it was only in the next few days following that it actually became apparent that this knock that he picked up actually was more serious. I think it's something that he'd possibly been carrying for a little while. And that was the last game that he actually played that season, and he still finished the season as the top scorer in Scottish football.
I think he scored 36 goals, 26 games, 36 goals. But what I read was that the injury that he received was a very devastating injury, and apparently there were some like floating bits of bone swirling around in his knee, and I'm not entirely sure that he really got over that injury. And he's someone that's really caught my eye when I've been doing the research for this, because 36 goals in 4 or 5 months is quite amazing. Is there anyone at this point who was it that Celtic signed to replace the injured Joe McBride?
Well, we didn't actually sign anyone to replace Joe McBride. We signed Willie Wallace in December of 1966, and Willie Wallace made his debut on the 7th of December sorry, not the 7th, the 10th of December, Willie Wallace made his debut against Motherwell, and Joe McBride actually scored the 4th goal in that match. I think it was I'm thinking what the word is. It's serendipitous timing, maybe. I don't know if that's the right word. But Willie Wallace was actually signed before Joe McBride's injury. Jock Steed's original plan was to put the two of them together. He felt that Joe McBride and Willie Wallace could have been an absolutely devastating partnership, and unfortunately, it didn't prove to be the case because of that injury to Joe McBride. So it was really, obviously, it must have been the unluckiest player in European football at that year, I'd imagine.
When Joe McBride, obviously, because he would have been based on his goal scoring tally, he would have been a massive part of the kind of early success of that season. But after he got injured, was there any discernible change in his style of play? Because I imagine that he would have. I mean, again, I don't have any information on this, but I imagine he would have been more of a kind of box in the box striker. Whereas Wallace, to me, and Wallace, Chalmers, Lennox seemed to be kind of pacey strikers that would do a lot of running and stuff like that. Was there any kind of change in the way that Celtic approach games, or any kind of tactical changes because of that injury?
I don't think there were any real tactical changes, but Willie Wallace and Joe McBride, by all accounts, were very different players. Joe McBride was a sort of bustling forward, fantastic header of a ball. Jimmy McGrory actually said that Joe McBride was the best striker he'd ever seen at Celtic. And Willie Wallace obviously was a more of a runner, someone who was, I don't want to say he's more intelligent player, but he was more of relied more on speed and skill rather than sort of almost like brute force with Joe McBride. I don't think they really changed the approach. I think Willie Wallace really just it wasn't a deliberate change of approach. I think it just it just happened that way.
I've got a quote here from Billy McNeil in the Celtic book. I think Willie Wallace cost Celtic £30,000, which is probably quite a lot of money for 1966. He said, "I remember Big Jock telling me about his intention of buying Willie Wallace. Jock said, 'We're going for Wallace because I think he and Joe McBride could become the greatest striking partnership in the history of the Scottish game, maybe even in Europe.'" It's quite large words from a large man, and it's just a shame that they never got to play. They never got to play that many games together. I'm sure they played maybe 1 or 2 games because, as you say, he was bought. I think there's maybe about a 3-week window between Wallace signing for Celtic and then McBride actually catching the injury. But it's as you said, James, it's quite a sad tale because obviously with Celtic's most successful season, he had a massive impact in the first half of it. But I want to ask you about Celtic in the league at this point. So let's fast forward a little bit to just the end of January, the start of February. What is the situation in the Scottish League One, I think it was called then?
Right. No, February, Celtic and Rangers were kind of nip and tuck at the top of the league. Now, the night before we played Vojvodina at Celtic Park, Rangers beat Airdrie 1-0, and that put them ahead of Celtic on goal average, having played an extra game.
Celtic have been drawn, so we've beat Zurich, Nantes, and then we're in the quarter-finals of the European Cup. I think Jock made a decision to play a friendly against a team from the same country, Yugoslavia, and that was Dinamo Zagreb. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Right, now, obviously that was a match where he wanted to give the players a bit of experience of the kind of style of play that they might see against Vojvodina. And it was also a match where Jock tried to experiment a little bit. He actually played a 3-4-3 formation in that match. And the team were numbered very unusually as well, with David Katanax was number 2, Billy McNeil wearing number 3, John Hughes was wearing number 5. So he actually numbered it. If you imagine the formation with the goalkeeper at the top, the numbers went from left to right in the defence, and then from the midfield it went from right to left, and then the forwards it went from left to right again. So very unusual numbering, and it was a 3-4-3 formation. And by all accounts, it was a very sort of a fluid formation, and it led to a really good performance against Dinamo Zagreb. And they actually missed a bucket load of chances as well. And then in the end, they conceded a goal in the last couple of minutes, so they lost 1-0. So it wasn't a formation that was actually tried out again following possibly because they'd lost that match. But there was maybe some potential in there, and it just shows Jock's his willingness to experiment and his willingness to think maybe beyond his beyond his years, maybe. So,
was there a reason for the numbers?
It actually makes sense when you look at it on the page. So from left to right, as you look at it, there was Katanak's number 2, McNeil number 3, who was in the middle, and it was John Clark was at number 4. Then we had John Hughes on the left wing. So going from left to right, you had Hughes at 5. You had Bobby Murdoch at number 6, Bertie Auld number 7, Tommy Gemmell number 8, and then from the forward line, we had Chalmers was on the right hand side of the forward, so he was number 9, Willie Wallace number 10, Bobby Lennox number 11. It was just the way the numbers were actually in a perfectly reasonable sequence when you look at it on the page.
Just to jump in there, just to ask, do you think, and again it's a more general question about the kind of run that we're on, Celtic up to this point, apart from basically the season before, a couple of other forays into, I think it was the Cup Runners' Cup, we didn't really have much of a European pedigree. Do you think that this kind of naivety might have actually helped a kind of young fresh team like Celtic, and the fact that they probably didn't let the pressure get to them because they were kind of newcomers to this scene?
I think there's an element of that about it. Yeah, I think they didn't. They had no fear. Maybe they didn't realise the enormity of what they were doing at the time. I don't think they stopped to think about just what they were about on the cusp of achieving, and maybe that did help. That there was maybe less tension than there might otherwise have been.
So we play against Dynamo Zagreb, and one noticeable change there was David Katanak. And did he play a big role in this season, or was he a bit part player? Because I think I'm looking at the teams between the Zagreb game, which was the 2nd of February, which is a whole month before the first leg against Vojvodina. I'm very curious as to how that game was arranged, because obviously it sounds like the sort of thing you hear about these days. And I think you're right, James, when you point to the sort of progressive ideas that Jockstein had to get a team in from a neighbouring, well, in the same country, but in a neighbouring a large team from the same region to come over and play Celtic to give them an idea. But the one noticeable omission is, I think it's Craig. He's not playing against Zagreb. So, what was David Katanak's role in the 1966-1967 season?
I think he only played 2 or 3 games that season. He did deputise for Jim Craig 1 or 2 matches. Jim Craig had a couple of injuries around about February, March, and I think I'm right in saying that he played against Queen's Park in the Scottish Cup quarter-final on the 11th of March. He didn't play a massive role that season.
Yeah. I'm just having a little look here. I think, you're right. He played 2 matches, and this is not including the Zagreb game. I'm looking at the statistics of the season, and he played only 2 games, so he's deputising for Jim Craig. But it seems like a consistent team all the way through. So we're basically almost up at the Vojvodina. What is Celtic's form like in the run-up in the league in the month of February? Because the first game that we're going to talk about after we speak about this is the Vojvodina game away, the first leg. But what was Celtic's form like in February and for that after the Dynamo Zagreb game? Was there any sort of things that stand out?
Well, the beginning of the month they were actually quite good. There was a 3-0 win away to Airdrie on the 4th of February. Then there was the Dynamo Zagreb match. We had a 5-0 win away to Ayr United on the 11th of February. Scottish Cup match against Elgin City on the 18th of February, which was a 7-0 win. But then there was a bit of a hiccup. The last match before the first leg against Vojvodina, we went to Stirling Albion, who were third bottom of the league, and we actually drew 1-1. We were trailing to George Peebles' goal, and John Hughes managed to head an equaliser in the second half. But the match ended 1-1. The pitch, like it often was back at that time, the pitch was an absolute quagmire, and Jimmy Johnston picked up a knock which almost kept him out of the first leg over in Novi Sad. So it wasn't the best preparation in terms of that weekend before the match.
Yeah, I think the 7-0 win against Elgin City was the biggest win of the season.
There was a League Cup sectional match against St Mirren where we scored 8. We did concede 2. So there was an 8-2 win over St Mirren early in the season as well. Yeah.
So I'm looking at the biggest win here. I've got that, the Scottish League Cup, St Mirren 8-2, McBride with 4, Lennox with 2, Auld in Chalmers, but the Elgin City game in the February 18th that you mentioned, Lennox with a hat-trick, Wallace 2, Chalmers and Hughes. So that will take us up to the Vojvodina game, and hopefully we've got Milosevic on the line. So we're joined by another guest. His name is Mickey, and he is a Vojvodina fan. And am I right in saying, Mickey, that you are a Vojvodina FC fanatic and historian?
Yes, I am a fanatic historian, but I'm also the part of the club management because I'm from the City Council of Novi Sad City. So I'm working in one of my businesses also to connect the city with the club, with the football club Vojvodina, to manage him as better as it can be to manage the club and keep relations.
Excellent. So we wanted to speak to you, and we also have James, who runs a wonderful Twitter account, which I understand you're familiar with, and we want to try and balance you two against each other. And I want you to give me and give us and the people listening an idea of how powerful and how good this Vojvodina FC side, the Novi Sad side, were. Who were their players? Who were their stars? What was the style of football? What was their reputation like? Yeah.
The reputation of the club, Vojvodina, that is the question, yes?
Yes.
The reputation of the football club Vojvodina was and still is very powerful because in the former Yugoslavia, when we played from 1945 till 1990s, till the Balkan Wars, Vojvodina was one of the fifth biggest clubs in the former Yugoslavia, after Red Star, Partizan, Dinamo Zagreb, and Hajduk Split. And Vojvodina was 2 times champion of that former Yugoslavia. And one first title was in 1966 when we first played Champions Cup, European Champions Cup. So that was actually our first big European contest. And that time was the team was very interesting. That the guys that played in Vojvodina that year in 1967, it was the team from approximately everybody was born very near Novi Sad. So actually, the old guys were actually local guys. So that is even more interesting that because they came from their own city or maybe a region abroad 50 kilometers near Novi Sad. So that Champions Cup was very significant because we were like beating Atletico Madrid in Madrid 2 times. And we were beating Admira Vienna. So so the game with Celtic was very big and very decisive. And we had a little problem with the team. Actually, the manager who ran that team that year was Vujadin Boškov, famous Vujadin Boškov. Who later was the manager of biggest European clubs as Real Madrid and Sampdoria, and so he actually sold our striker Sylvester Takac to France club Saint-Étienne. So we at the game with the Celtic, we didn't have the best scorer, so that was a little bit problem. But we succeeded to win the first game in Novi Sad by goal by Stantic, and after that the hopes were high, of course, after that winning, and actually I think that win Vojvodina against Celtic was the only one lost game that Celtic had that year in European Cup. So actually, Vojvodina was with high hopes and go get to the trip on the Glasgow on the big stadium at 75,000 people. So the atmosphere was very, very high and very intense. And unfortunately, we lost by the goal in dying seconds. And our goalkeeper Pantelic, which was the captain, he was angry on the referee, but that was it. We were like finished our European dream at that game. But for example, if we all think in Novi Sad and in Serbia and in former Yugoslavia that Vojvodina, if she gets to the final, if she beats the Celtic, she will beat the Inter in Milan, of course, as Celtic did in Lisbon. And the history of football will be different. Of course, we were very happy that Celtic won that title if we couldn't succeed, because Celtic was like a team. They were very correct with us, very, very, very friendly after that game, and that was one nice story for football, European magic football. But Celtic and Vojvodina relationships were very good, and we were very happy to see that Celtic won that year in Lisbon. Lisbon Lions won the Inter Milan. So if we couldn't, that good. It is good that Celtic did it, and it is like something like for us that actually that was the biggest title of English British clubs at that time. That actually I think the first British title for British football clubs in European context. So that was a really, really big set for Celtic. Unfortunately, Vojvodina after that sold the whole team to the European clubs, and after that we didn't succeed to win a lot for a long year. After that, we didn't succeed to win the championship of former Yugoslavia, and it was like changing history, breakdown for Vojvodina that year was very significant in 1967.
Sorry, just to jump in there, you mentioned a point earlier about the fact that most of the players were born in and around Novi Sad. I don't know if you, knew as well, but for Celtic, most of the players were born within a 20-mile radius of Celtic Park. So there was a very similar type of.
Actually, yes. Yes. The local guys played the best football that time for all both clubs. Yeah, that is actually true. I read that that the Celtic team was also local guys from Glasgow and suburbs of Glasgow, and that is actually very interesting that the same year, same clubs were challenging themselves in European club and the local. Actually, that was the beautiful history of that kind of football, because the football then was much more pure, and it was like the players were the biggest fans of that club that they're playing, as in Celtic, as in Vojvodina too. So the guys are like were the monuments, living legends playing for their club, and the people were like cheering. The money wasn't so important then. Like I suppose, like in Glasgow as in Vojvodina too, and we had that problem because in football in former Yugoslavia, as a communist country in that years, were like different system. It was not. It was like politically dictated which player will play, who will go to Red Star, who will go, because we were always taking players from our club, from biggest Red Star and Partizan, because the political decision was that they have to go there to play for their generals club and police clubs. So that was Vojvodina wasn't that in that position. She wasn't the state project. She was the local project, and we called ourselves the Football Factory. because every year we make really, really good players, and at the end you can see our players now playing in Southampton, in Lazio, in the biggest in Celta, in Manchester United, in the biggest clubs in the Europe, because the football school Vojvodina had is really, really one of the best in the southeastern Europe.
Just to jump in again there, you mentioned about how a lot of the decisions were based on politics and who the government administration at the time would want to play for the better teams. May I ask, does that make the kind of success of Vojvodina at this time even more crazy, even more remarkable, because you'd managed to actually have a team that if they hadn't come out against Celtic could well have went on and won the biggest tournament in football? How was the reaction around the country to Vojvodina's success at that time?
Well, Vojvodina's success was surprising for whole former Yugoslavia in that year, because nobody believed that we will beat Celtic in the first game, and that we will beat 2 times Atletico Madrid, in Novi Sad, and to beat Rapid Vienna is actually Admira. Vienna was a little not so strong club, so it wasn't so big surprise. But those big clubs, the winning was very surprised. The whole football and public in the former Yugoslavia, and actually it was like in that period, for a year before that, the Partizan was in finals in 1965, 1966. They played against Real Madrid, the final in. I think it was in Brussels, I think, and actually then the football from the Eastern European countries wasn't so far away from the Western clubs, so we could compete, and actually it was not so big difference then. But of course Vojvodina was a big surprise, because it was first title that she was the champion of the Yugoslavia, and they played very well in European Cup, and only by luck they didn't succeed to go to the finals. And actually I think that the real final between Celtic and Vojvodina in that year, because that also shows, because we both in the first game and we lost the second in the dying minutes. And I watched the BBC documentary about the game, about Celtic and Inter Milan, and I can see that the Celtic won easily, and it was much more. The Celtic was dominating that game, and really they deserved to win that game, that final. So I think that the real final was between Vojvodina and Celtic in 1967.
I do think that that's something that a lot of the players from Celtic that played in this match would agree with. The captain, Billy McNeil, said that they were an extremely tough opponent, the most difficult they faced that season. Bobby Lennox, a wonderful striker for Celtic who played in the game and in the final, suggested that they were the toughest opponents he faced that season. But also Tommy Gemmell, who was a defender for Celtic, he suggested that Vojvodina were the toughest European games he played in his entire career. Can I just ask you, Mickey, what sort of football, what was the style of football that they were playing under Boskov? As you say, Boskov is a very, very famous manager, and he actually went on to I'm unsure if you're aware, but I'm 99% sure that he was the manager when Celtic played against Real Madrid in the early 80s. However, what sort of style of football were Vojvodina playing at this time under Boskov, and what made him such a special manager?
Well, he was a good player, but a really good player, because with him, Vojvodina also as a captain. He was a captain of Vojvodina playing. He was also the guy from Novi Sad, born in Novi Sad. He was the captain of the team in 1950. And actually, after he finished the career, he was very, very young manager, and actually it was his beginning of his manager career with Vojvodina in 1967, and with that success. And after that, he was like. The whole Europe was open to him because of he was very young and he was a good player. He was the captain. With Vojvodina he played 2 times the final of Yugoslav Cup. We didn't win that games, but with two finals before that title in 1966. And what is important with Boško to say is that he was. Very clever, intelligent guy, not just educated, but he had a football philosophy. We said that he invented if football has philosophers, Vladan Boško would be one of them, one of the biggest, like Aristotle or Socrates, something like that in football, because he lived football. And that is why, and he didn't care about the money. Money came after that because of living football. He didn't play football for money, and he lived football. And because of that, he succeeded to be the good manager. And after that, he played with Real Madrid and Sampdoria, the biggest success for their clubs. And what is interesting that we played last year. I was in Torino. We played European League against Sampdoria, and the whole game was in the glory of Vladan Boško because he was one of the best in history in Vojvodina and Sampdoria also. And we won that game 4-0 in Torino. It was a big surprise for whole Europe and for us too. But actually, we said that Vladan Boško managed that after because he was a fan. He said once. Every club is on the other side, and only one Vojvodina is on the other one. And Vojvodina was really, really special for him. And of course, 2 years ago we had a funeral of him in Novi Sad, and it was very big and with the biggest respects for him. That was actually, we called our sports center by his name, of course, and the square around the football stadium is called Vladan Boško Square, and football center Vladan Boško, which is our place where we have 20 fields, football field, and center for all football activities that football players had to have. And that is actually the story about Vojvodina is really, really a lot the story of Vladan Boško in that game, that days. And without Vladan Boško, Vojvodina wouldn't be what she is now and what she was there. And without Vojvodina, Vladan Boško wouldn't be what he was become in the glory of football of Europe in the years and decades after that.
It sounds like there is a similarity between Boškov, the coach of Vojvodina, and not necessarily the same career trajectory, but the same level of success, the same level of status and legend. And I would compare him with Jock Stein, who was the manager of Celtic, who was a progressive thinker, very, very much well before thinking ahead of football styles, football philosophies, long before people had even considered. Which I want to kind of bring James into the conversation, and sort of, so the 1st of March was the first game, 1967 against Vojvodina. Obviously, we lost that game. Yeah. James, is there anything you want to add on that?
There was something that Mickey had said there about the sort of the camaraderie that had developed between maybe Celtic and Vojvodina. I don't know if you've ever read it's a book, One Afternoon in Lisbon by Tom Campbell and Pat Woods, and they mentioned how excuse me, that Novi Sad was in many ways a very similar city to Glasgow, a very industrial city and so on. And a lot of the reports from the time stress how sporting the occasions were. They were very hard fought matches, but very clean matches as well. And I think there was definitely I think there was definitely a kind of connection was sort of forged between Celtic and Vojvodina over those two legs.
That'll take us in. So Vojvodina win 1-0. Can I ask, Mickey, who was the scorer of the goal in Yugoslavia?
It was Stantic. The guy, he wasn't the striker guy, but he succeeded to strike the game. The goal, I think it was 18 minutes. It was at the beginning of the game. Oh, sorry, it was in 60 minutes. It was in the second part of the game. Yes. And what is interesting, maybe you don't know that, but it is interesting also for the Celtic fans and for the history of football. That game in Novi Sad was the first game that we had the rights on our stadium, because before that we didn't play night games, and that was our history first light game in the night with the reflectors, because we sold Takac, Sylvester Takac, our scorer, in France, and we get money and we made those reflectors. And for me it was not a good idea to sell him in the season that was very important, but the money was in that time very, very, very important for that investment. And we actually had the night game, first history night game in Novi Sad was against Celtic in that quarterfinals of European Champions Cup.
And I would like to ask one last question before we move on to the second tie of the quarterfinal. Yeah. Who was the star player of Vojvodina at this time?
A star player. Actually, Vojvodina had star player was Sylvester Takac, but also Vojvodina, those guys were, maybe the success of that team was in that there was no stars. The stars player really was that Sylvester Takac, because they wanted, the European Cup teams wanted him before that European Champions League. After we won that Yugoslav League, after that they wanted in France, of course, and a lot of French clubs wanted him to play. And he's living now in France. He's still alive and well. And living in Saint-Étienne there as a pensioner. And in Vojvodina, actually, other players wasn't the star players. But the goalkeeper Pantelic was also our legend of the club, and he was the captain of that team. And he was, so the goalkeeper but there was also Brzic, Pušiburk, Trivic. There was also, again, after that game, there were the national team of Yugoslavia players after that season. They were like playing also for the national Yugoslav selection. So actually, basically, the star player was sold, Sylvester Takac in France, and the goalkeeper, Pantelic, was the captain, and he was very respected and very actually the best goalkeeper that we had in our history. Yes.
To get things from a Celtic perspective, James, what was the general mood going into this game? Did everyone seem to think that Celtic would handle this game with relative ease, considering they'd beaten teams from bigger footballing nations at the time, or were the press and was the management, were they still quite wary of what Vojvodina could do?
Well, Jock Stein actually had warned the players well before this game that this Vojvodina team were a very, very good team. The quote that he had from them was that they were a very big and strong team, but excellent technically as well. So there was no surprise on the part of the Celtic players when we actually got to Novi Sad and that first half. It was a bit of a back-to-the-wall performance in the first half for Celtic. Although that was probably one of the first times when we really defended really, really well in Europe. So for 45 minutes we were a bit under the cosh, but most of the reports stressed that Ronnie Simpson didn't really have a save to make, although one of the reports from the time says that there were several occasions where the ball came very close to the post of the bar. So it was a really, really competent first 45 minutes from Celtic in terms of defending. They actually opened out a bit in the second half. Bobby Lennox missed a great chance on 50 minutes. where he was played through by Bertie Auld, and I think he shot first time, and maybe he could have had a touch first, but the Pantelich, the goalkeeper, made a magnificent save from that one. And then in 53 minutes, Billy McNeil, of all people, burst through the middle, through the centre, to the edge of the box, and he fired it wide. But it was the goal actually came 20 minutes from the end, and that was a familiar story for Celtic really over the years, with a bit of a defensive calamity. Tommy Gemmell had tried to pass the ball to John Clark on the edge of the penalty box, and it kind of caught Clark completely off guard, and the ball ran through to Stanic, and Ronnie Simpson sort of ran out, tried to smother the ball, but Stanic got to it first, knocked the ball into the empty net there. So I think the team were disappointed in the end to have lost 1-0, but they were well prepared beforehand, and they fully expected a really tough game, and that's exactly what they got.
Can I just, I would like to take this moment, similar to what you do, and I kind of want our listeners to know, that Jim Craig runs a very good, almost like a kind of diary of that season, and he looks very so it's for anyone who obviously, you know, is a bit of a Celtic fanatic, it's a must read for that season. It goes into meticulous detail. I'm not sure whether it's a diary or he's recalling it from memory, which would be even more impressive, but he speaks about it after the game, and it's kind of, anyone who knows the kind of character that Tommy Gemmell was, if you're wondering whether this kind of affected his self-confidence, I'll just leave you with this, and this is the words of Jim Craig. At the post-match banquet that night after the match, Tam and I were sitting together, both with a drink in our hands, when I broached the delicate subject as diplomatically as possible. You made a bit of a balls up tonight, did you not? He just sipped his drink and smiled. Don't worry, Kearney, I'll make it up to you.
Which leads us very nicely into the second leg, which is in March the 8th. And James, I would like you just to take us away with this one and explain the sort of the mentality Celtic had going into the game, and also what happens in the game, because you are the man that does the minute by minute.
Well, again, the Celtic team knew that this was they had a mountain to climb in this second leg. The whole team was just so impressed by the Vojvodina players and their style of play, and they knew this was a tough game. Like I said earlier, the night before, Rangers had beaten Airdrie, which put them top of the league on goal average. A couple of things in the build-up to the match. The Vojvodina players weren't allowed to train on the pitch at Celtic Park before the game. Jock Stein wouldn't allow it. The pitch was a bit of a quagmire. It had been raining heavily in Glasgow over the previous week or so. There was actually a reserve match on the Saturday that had also been cancelled. So they didn't allow them to train on the pitch. And Celtic had a bit of a mini injury crisis as well before that. In the first leg, Steve Chalmers had picked up a shoulder injury, and he was only about 70% fit before the match. But Jock Stein felt that he had to play regardless. As we spoke about earlier with Joe McBride, he actually went in for his knee operation the day before the second leg, and Willie Wallace was ineligible. He only joined from Hearts in December, so Steve Chalmers played well, not fully fit. And we also were missing Bertie Auld that night. He was injured on the Saturday in the match against St Mirren, so that's why Charlie Gallagher was playing, and he ended up playing such a massive part in Celtic's winning goal as well. So Jock Stein, he was more worried about this game than any other match that season. And as he actually called for a special effort from the Celtic fans in the press on the morning of the match, he basically said they were the best team we played. And he said that when the European Cup was brought back to Celtic Park. He was asked about Inter Milan and what an achievement it had been to beat Inter Milan, and he actually said that night that the best team Celtic played was Vojvodina. And
this is why we have decided to do this podcast, because this is a game that not many people know a lot about, but from doing the research and being into Celtic's history, as I explained, at least 3 legendary Celtic players openly state this game was huge. And as Miki said, this game was probably Celtic's final. This game was a final of sorts. So the starting team for the second leg was Simpson, Craig, Gemmell, Murdoch, McNeil, Clark, Johnston, Lennox, Chalmers and Gallagher. And Hughes as well, sorry. And Stevie Chalmers scores the first goal. And then can you just give us a little bit of information about the first and the second goal, James?
Yeah, well, it's quite ironic that we're talking about two massive, high quality teams there. But the first two goals in this tie both came from defensive mix-ups. We had Tommy Gemmell's slack pass to John Clark in the first leg. The first Celtic's equalising in the tie on the night actually came from a Tommy Gemmell cross. So I think he did make it up to Kearney in the end. He put a crossover from the left, and Pantelic actually dropped the ball right at Steve Chalmers' feet, and he just had to tap the ball home from there. So the first two goals both coming from defensive howlers in a way. So in 5 minutes, the first 5 minutes, Vojvodina actually missed an absolute sitter from about 6 yards. The player, Vojvodina striker, missed a fantastic chance, and that could be seen as a sort of a history-changing moment. If that goal had gone in, Celtic would have been in real trouble. The rest of the first half was very, very tense. There was lots of pressure from Celtic, but no real chances. The Times, in their report the following day at half-time, they said at that point they had seemed to offer only heart and sinew against the minds and technical ability of a clever foe. So the first at half-time in that match, there was a real sense of restlessness amongst the crowd. Jock Stein changed things around a little bit at half-time, and he actually moved John Hughes to play it inside right, and it seemed to unsettle the Vojvodina defence to have Jimmy Johnston and John Hughes both running at them from that right-hand side. And Hughes and Johnston really were pivotal in Celtic's victory on the night. They really started to turn up the pressure on the defence. After Chalmers' goal, there was about half an hour of constant Celtic pressure. Pantelic made some fantastic saves in that match from Chalmers and Hughes. Charlie Gallagher had a great shot save, Jimmy Johnston as well. And I'd probably say that the winner that night, we've seen lots of dramatic goals at Celtic Park. I wonder if we've ever seen a more dramatic goal than that one in the last minute of that match. Maybe only in recent times, anything to compare to it might be Scott McDonald's winning against Milan, or maybe James Forrest scoring against Karagandhi. But obviously the stakes back then were far, far higher than in those two matches.
And the final goal was scored by whom?
It was scored by Billy McNeil. It was kind of a recreation of the 1965 Scottish Cup winning goal. Jimmy Johnston had made a run down the right wing in the final minute of the match, knocked it for a corner, and it was Charlie Gallagher who put the crossover, and Billy McNeil making a late run into the box as he did. And it seemed to be a split second of total silence just as the ball hit the back of the net, and then absolute bedlam. It's worth pointing out the Vojvodina players were protesting very strongly. I'm not sure exactly what about, but the referee didn't seem to show any interest in it.
Mickey, can I just jump in there and ask you, what are the perceptions on the Vojvodina side of the second leg? Because obviously, if Vojvodina would have held out for another minute, then it would have been a third game which would have been played in a neutral venue in Rotterdam. Speaking to people, obviously, and you're very much in with the club, and perhaps you've spoken to some of the players of that time. What was their kind of feelings about that second leg? Was it seen as a real missed opportunity, or was it seen as just one of those things that happens in football?
First of all, I want to. I was enjoying our colleague knowledge of that the details of the games, those two games against Vojvodina and Celtic, and the second leg for Vojvodina was very, very. They got to Glasgow with high hopes, of course. I talked because a lot of players are still alive, and I was traveling to Plzeň. Again, we played in European Cup against Victoria Plzeň, and I talked in the plane with our striker Vlasa Pušibuk. He was playing in that game in Glasgow, and he said that when they were happy that they won the first game, of course, and they hoped, of course, and they think that they can win the. Actually had the positive result in the Glasgow too, and to go to the semi-finals of the European Cup. But as you know, then the rule wasn't with the scoring goals. You know that if you score in the Novi Sad, and if you lost 2 2-1 or 2-0 or 3-0. So the problem was that the guys were like playing a little more defensively than they used to play. And that was the mistake, of course. They thought that maybe they can arrange the positive result, and the game wasn't going on that plan as they planned. And the goal that they get in the dying seconds, only the referee after that goal that Celtic scored in dying seconds, the game was finished because the ball was on the center, and the judge just whistled the end of the game, and it was a big celebration in Glasgow, and of course a big sorrow for Williana. But also our players were angry at the referee because they said that there was a foul on their goalkeeper Pantelic, but before that goal. But the thing is that that was our biggest game in our history, because it was a second leg of semi-final or quarter-final of European Cup, and we lost it. So it's not good when you have the biggest game that is lost. And the problem is that after that the club wasn't having good days after that. It was hard times after that, selling players, and there was long years to come to win another champions title of former Yugoslavia, and so basically, and what they told me, Pušnik told me that there was a big crowd of stadium, that is 75,000 people in Glasgow making incredible noise and rooting for Celtic, but in fair, of course, in very fair and very, very football positive way of. So the old style also rooting for the club. So it was very nice for them to play, but also very hard to play in that in the full crowded stadium, and so high hopes, lots of tough challenges, and unfortunately maybe they say that they missed the chance because the strategy of Vojvodina playing in that game against Celtic in Glasgow was defending the result from Novi Sad, and that was the key problem, and that was maybe our biggest loss, the reason that we didn't score in Glasgow. Yeah.
I don't want to torture you more with the details of it, but if I could just ask you one kind of final question. How do you think, let's just change the scenario here, if Vojvodina had have beaten Celtic, how do you think, and subsequently went on to win the European Cup, which they could well have done, based on all the kind of evidence and testimonies that we have from the Celtic players now, what do you think that could have done for the club, and do you think, and to go back to the point you touched on earlier, do you think that the administration of the government and stuff meant that Vojvodina couldn't have kept that going, or do you think that the European Cup could have been the catalyst for greater success in the future?
Well, that's a very good question, because that is the point to understand in which conditions Vojvodina played. Because when you, for example, can you imagine that in Serbia, very 1 or 2 or 3 or 5% of people really know what Vojvodina succeeded in 1976 in the football history of former Yugoslavia, the whole former Yugoslavia, and the percentage of former Yugoslavia is even smaller than it. But in Serbia, it is something that it's not so much written and said about that history team of football team of Vojvodina, and that is why in the communist period, in the communist country, it was the problem that if you won, then it's okay, the government to give you money and if you lost, then it's all going to hell, And that was the problem with Vojvodina, because I'm sure that we won against Celtic the second leg, or had the positive results, and we played in the semi-finals against Dukla, and I'm sure that we also won that game. And in the Inter Milan, we actually won Inter Milan in the Fairs Cup. Maybe you know that there was something like called Fair Cup, the City Fair. So the cities that had fairs had the cup, European Cup. Then there was no European Winners' Cup. So that's something different in that period of history. So we played against Inter Milan 2 years before that, so 1964, and we won. So maybe I think that we would won that final also in Lisbon. So it will be Lisbon Lions would be from Novi Sad, not from Celtic or from Glasgow. So, but we are happy that Glasgow won, really, because it was like Vojvodina played. It was like some kind of happy sadness for us to see Celtic won, because it was like the part of Vojvodina played that game also against Inter Milan, because we had a tough game against Celtic. So it was like better everybody wanted Celtic to win that game against Inter, because it was like some kind of I don't know, compensation for Vojvodina. The team that won against us won that European Cup, so we will be in the history that the only team that beat Celtic in the European Cup will be Vojvodina. So, but the problem is that we are like small team, no money, just really good football and nothing else. And so the fans, we had the stadium. Hello, the stadium is approximately the same as it is now. It's about 25,000 people can manage there. So actually that is the problem. That is one also key evidence that everything stopped from then till now. So that we won that European Cup, we would be the biggest Yugoslavian football club, and after that we will be actually the team will stay to play together, and who knows what would happen, how many titles of national league we will win. But we were recovering now, and we are also strong in one smaller league, Serbian league. So we are always in the first of three teams in the Yugoslav Serbian league. Red Star, Partizan, and Vojvodina are always in the three places at the top, winning the cups and something like that. But we are like having problems with financials, and we can't compete with biggest European clubs. We can surprise Sampdoria, we can surprise Trabzonspor, Bursaspor, I don't know. We can beat Rapid Vienna, but when we come to English teams, it's a problem. And actually, not English. Like, okay, we won last year in Ireland, Connacht in European Cup, and we won. Scandinavian teams are not a problem, but Spain, Atletico Madrid, we played 2 games in 3 years ago with Atletico Madrid in European Cup, and we lost 3-0 in Madrid and 2-1 in Novi Sad. So we are not competitive so much anymore with the biggest clubs, but as we were in their days playing Atletico, beating them 2 times, and beating Celtic, beating Fiorentina, beating AC Milan, Inter Milan, and so the problem is with money and with financials. We can only sell players to become big players in Italian, French, Spain, and British leagues.
And I just would like to ask James one final question, I guess, about the second leg that we've spoken about. And we know that Charlie Gallagher who's probably considered one of the unsung heroes of the season. I asked you earlier on about that, and having seen and known, and now actually in thinking about it, the impact that his cross to Billy McNeil for us to score that goal in the last minute. Do you think that game, that last minute, that goal was the catalyst and win everything that season?
Well, I think obviously when you get to the semi-final, you're only a couple of steps away, and yeah, definitely. I think when you think about the team that did win the European Cup, they were more than just the Lisbon Lions. So there were players who played in the earlier rounds who played massive parts in Celtic actually getting there. So people like Willie O'Neill, who was the regular left back in the first half of that season, and he actually lost his place in the team when Jim Craig came back in around about January. There would be Charlie Gallagher, and there would also be John Hughes as well. They were so, in many ways, a lot of them were unlucky to not actually play in Lisbon. I think there was nothing inevitable about the 11 players who made up the team on that day. The first time they actually played together, I think, was in February against St Johnstone at Burton Park. So I think there were a lot of players that Celtic need to thank for the European Cup win, on top of the 11 who actually won the match in Lisbon.
Excellent. So I don't have any other questions. Gary, do you have any other questions you would like to ask? Or James, would you like to ask any of us questions?
I'm all right, thanks.
Yeah,
okay.
Just basically want to say thanks and everything. In terms of just to finish on Mickey there, you said that today Vojvodina qualified for Europe. Would that be correct? Just to kind of bring it to modern day.
Yes, well, I didn't hear the last part of your question, but I figure out that you're asking, did Vojvodina qualify for European League? Yes, we did, of course, and we are having good quotas and coefficients because the last 5 years we played off in 3 times in 5 years, so we will be like a team that is having an upper hand in those games, and unfortunately our team is not so strong as it was 2 years ago. But maybe we can, with some kind of part of luck, we can manage to play in the group phase. So can as maybe I hope that we will play against Celtic in the coming years, and in Champions League, of course, and it will be a great game, a great idea to maybe the Celtic game in Novi Sad. I can arrange that, and maybe if somebody heard this from the Celtic FC Celtic officials, to contact me, my contacts, and to contact me to manage that game, that Celtic can come here in Novi Sad to play against Vojvodina, maybe in the glory of that season that you won European Cup, and in the glory of our season that was our biggest also European success, that we played quarterfinals, getting there in 8 clubs in Europe, and unfortunately our best teams, because that picture of our champions team from 1966 is really one of the important pictures, photographs of our history, because of not just because of the team, but also because of our manager Vujadin Boško, who was the institution of Europe, of European football in the whole history of football. So it's actually my invitation that we will arrange everything for Celtic team, maybe in this summer, for the preparation for European qualifications for Celtic also. So I think it's a good idea.
Maybe one day. And it's a very romantic story and a very romantic tie. So maybe one day Celtic will play again in Novi Sad and against Vojvodina. But I would like to thank both of you for joining us on this podcast. It's a very special year for Celtic. This is being released on the day of the 25th of May, which will be 50 years exactly since the day that Celtic won the Big Cup. But again, this has been very enjoyable. I would just like to thank you, Mickey, in Serbia, and also James in Lincolnshire. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you. Good luck.
Pleasure Yeah, thank you very much for asking me. It's been a pleasure. Nice to speak to you as well, Mickey.
Away from you, my baby. I know it's hard for you, my baby, because it's hard for me, my baby, and the darkest hour is just before dawn. Each night before you go to bed, my baby, whisper a little prayer for me, my baby, and tell all the stars above. This is dedicated to the one I love. Can never be exactly like we wanted to be. I could be satisfied knowing you love me. One thing I want you to do, especially for me, and it's something that everybody needs. While I'm far away from you, my baby, whisper a little prayer for me, my baby, because it's hard for me, my baby, and the darkest hour is just before dawn.
So I'm joined by Gilly to talk about the upcoming massive game that we have on Saturday against Aberdeen. But we first want to start talking about a guy who I've been a massive fan of from the moment he signed, and even since Celtic were linked with him initially. I was always a big fan of hopefully getting him in, and that's Kris Commons. I just want to ask you, Gilly, like, where does he rank in the sort of pantheon of Celtic legends and greats and or even good players?
Well, I think without doubt he's been one of our best signings in the past 10 years. He was certainly a hunskelper when he was in his prime against the old co and the new co. He never really let us down in many big games. I think for me he's definitely like a modern great. But so I'm 34, so I would say he's kind of just about the same level, if not slightly below, kind of Sutton, Hartson and guys like that. But I'd imagine for a lot of Celtic fans who are younger, who are maybe 24, 25, 26, and Commons could be their kind of Hartson and Sutton's, he'll be up there as like one of their top heroes because he scored some massive goals for Celtic in some really big games.
I would go as far to say he's probably underrated and almost underappreciated, and I really like the fact how Brendan sort of gave him his moment, like quite an extended moment on Sunday, and I don't know if you've seen the interview. We spoke earlier. Did you manage to see the interviews with the players after the game?
I've not really seen it. I was obviously at the game, and
right.
I don't have Sky, so I've not really seen any of them, but I know you've given me a login for Celtic TV.
He just sounds like a fan. Yeah, he just spoke like a fan. He just sounded like one of us. He was just so humbled to be part of the day, and he just felt like he was one of us in the crowd. But I almost feel like he's been he's almost underrated, and I think he was a great signing. I would maybe go as far to say he's on the same level as like Moravcik, someone like that. You know, he scored big goals, important goals. He scored a lot of goals for Celtic. He scored like something like nearly 100 goals. I think
I've got the figure of 91 in my head. I was looking at this a week ago, thinking, is there any way if he got a wee sniff at the end of the season could he get the 100? And the figure I seen was 91, but I don't know how accurate it is, because you know what like these websites are.
I'm sure it's close to 100.
Yeah.
Because he was top goal scorer in Scotland one season, and for a guy who never really had a definite, refined position on the pitch, he scored a lot of goals. But he was a classic hunskelper, and he obviously scored against the Nuco when we played them at Hampden in the semi-final under Dyler. But I just want to say, like, I was a massive fan of him. Hopefully he sticks around. It sounds like he was going to stick around, and the only reason he hasn't played, he admits, was because he had to take 4 back injections to sort of see this to actually try and remain fit. And obviously we know with Brendan, who we're going to talk about now, his management style, you have to be at your peak level of fitness. So I just want to ask you about the management style of Rodgers. It's a very fucking loaded question, but like we were talking about the Lee Griffiths incident and how when he got taken off, there was a bit of a rammy on the sidelines, but the reaction after it, the sort of man management that he shows, and this is not the first time I've actually noticed Rodgers being a very meticulous manager, because I've spoken before about how after the game he actually goes and speaks to every single player personally and individually, and I even said he went up and spoke to your man Daz McKinnon.
Really, aye?
After a Hamilton game. So he goes around and he clearly knows his players. He clearly knows he does his work. He does his homework on them. He knows their positions. He knows their players, who they are, and blah blah blah. So I just want to ask you, what do you think of Rodgers' management style? What sort of makes him a cut above the rest?
The one thing that sticks out to me is respect. I think he demands total respect from the players. Certain managers just seem to command it. This kind of respect naturally from everyone. He gets it from the media, from the players, even from fans, and it's easy to also compare him to last season, Tony Dyler, who didn't have that natural respect, and I think that was certainly part of his downfall.
Have you ever seen a man so in control of everything that he does? Every single word that he utters is completely and utterly perfect. Have you ever came across anyone in any walk of life like that?
I can't say that I have. When I think about managers that demand respect, I think about Jock Stein and kind of Alex Ferguson spring to mind. But even I've seen interviews with them; they can be quite fiery and quite kind of flip kind of now and again. Whereas with Rodgers, it's so meticulous. Everything he says is exactly what he wants to say. I've never seen his feathers ruffled at all. He just seems so in control at all times.
Yeah, he's constantly in control. I've spoken to other people about this. Fred, who contributes to the podcast sometimes, I'd love to know who done his media training, the media management, because he's clearly went under a lot of like a course or something in how to deal with the media, and he's just so cool. And I even think that about other players. I've noticed that Kieran Tierney speaks extremely well in front of the media as well. He's very, very, very well spoken, very quite eloquent. He doesn't say too much, doesn't give too much away, and he's very respectful. And he's very much like Rodgers in that sense, although Tierney's young enough to be one of his sons. So I want to move on to the next question. We're kind of going to fire through these because we don't want to spend too long on this. I've said it for about 2 or 3 weeks now that I think this is probably the most. Not the most important, but the best season, the most enjoyable season of my life, and I just want to know where this ranks with you, Gilly.
Yeah, I probably agree with you, mate. My football memory starts when I was about 8, so that was around the 1990-91 season. So for me, if we win the treble on Sunday, which I fully believe we will, then this eclipses Matt O'Neill's treble season as the best season that I've enjoyed. I don't know of other fans who were about for Love Street or they winning the centenary and doubling the centenary year, but I can't really remember that, so I can't comment. So for me, and I think most people around my age will probably accept it, this invincible treble, if we get it, when we get it, will be the best footballing season in our lifetime.
It's kind of hard to appreciate it while it's happening.
Aye, definitely.
There's just so many good things that are happening at once, and it's just kind of like I'm just sort of swimming in it. But I think it's going to take a bit of hindsight to actually, when we step back and look back to what we actually have as it stands. There's so many things that are all aligning perfectly. The fans, the standing section, the financial state of the club, the harmony between the players and within the players in the group on their own, but also the relationship we have with the players on the pitch. Guys like Scott Brown, guys like Kieran Tierney. We saw on Sunday Kieran Tierney was getting right up. You must have saw this, but they actually also set up like a little stage in front of the Green Brigade to have photos taken in front of them. I mean, with the standing section, everything the Celtic way, all the developments.
Also at the game, I don't know if you picked this up, but they had the usual music, Blerno the Tannoy, and the Green Brigade would be starting their own songs, and the person in control was turning the volume down to let the Green Brigade kind of take over.
I never noticed that.
I would be happy with them just to patch the music at the end of the game, because it's a lot of crap, to be honest. The fans' songs are far better.
And another thing as well, it's the 50th anniversary of Celtic's most famous year. It's just like this season, there's just something tangible, something extremely special. And personally for me, I was thinking O'Neill's treble, stopping the 10, then you're going back a little bit and we're going back towards the 90s and the 80s, and it's not so great. But I genuinely feel undefeated. We've got a very, very good manager who's in complete control of everything that happens. Financial state, everything's going super duper well. So for me, this is the best season. This season ranks as one of the greatest in Celtic history.
I think this will be number 2.
The The caveat is Saturday.
Invincible treble will be number 2 behind Lisbon, in my opinion. I don't think there's many other people
It's massive.
who would argue with that.
It's absolutely massive, and obviously we know that football's probably more difficult now than it ever has been because of the money involved. So it's a huge feat. And just to finish, like, if we want to just go back 12 months, Kelly, to what we were talking about 12 months ago, we were talking about Ronnie Tyler.
I think all Celtic fans have. 12 months ago we just got Rodgers in, so we're probably thinking what could be, and I don't think we'd even in our wildest imagination thought we'd be sitting a few days away from an invincible domestic season.
How do you feel about the game on Saturday?
To be fair, if anything this season, we've learned not to be so cautious, like going into Old Firm games, having a bit of worry, and even the first cup final. I really think we will win it. I think we'll win it 3-0, but there's all that fear if we were to get beat, if there's a dodgy decision. But those things happen. But it's literally like a 1,000,000-to-1 shot if we're going to get beat. So pretty confident that Saturday's going to be a great day in Celtic's history and one to really enjoy.
So that kind of segues very nicely into the next question then. So, you know, there's a lot of people that we can say. I could name 5 or 6 people that I can absolutely count on to step up on Saturday. If one doesn't step up, 2 or 3 more will. If 3 don't step up, 3 other guys will. This brings me on to the next question, and it gives us the confidence. Who's been the best player this season?
I was actually talking to my mates about this the other night, and it got a bit heated. And I said, in my opinion, Kieran Tierney is the best player at Celtic. I think that out of anyone in the squad right now, he could step into any top team in Europe and not look out of place. I think Dembele maybe a year, 2 years away from that. He's a cracking player, a brilliant prospect, but at some games he's not been absolutely outstanding, whereas nearly every game Tierney's barely put a foot wrong. I think in the last few weeks he's had a few 7 out of 10s, and people have been saying he's looking a bit jaded or whatever, but I just think over the course of the season he's been absolutely brilliant.
It's amazing to think that he's just one of us. You know what I mean? He's just one of the wee guys that was in the stand. He was the ball boy against in one of the games. I can't remember what game it was. Like Barcelona, was it? He was a ball boy. Then he just grew up. He is just Celtic, and now he is, as you say. Like I'm not going to say he's been the best player. And it's difficult to choose. I'm just going to say Sinclair because it's a bit of a cop-out, but Sinclair scored a lot of important goals. He's been probably one of the main reasons why we have become a Rodgers-style side. But I could easily just say Scott Brown, I could even say Stuart Armstrong, I could say Dembele, I could say Tierney, I could even go to Michael Lustig, even Simunovic, Paddy Roberts, we've not even said Paddy Roberts, or even McGregor. People have just hit, several people have hit specific heights, certain heights, at the right time. A couple of players will drop back. You know, Armstrong started the season amazingly well when he came in against Rangers. He started amazingly well. Sort of fell back a tiny little bit. Then Rogic stepped up. Rogic fell back a bit. Paddy Roberts, and then McGregor steps up. Simunovic, Boyata's come in as well. It's just the stars are just aligning. It just feels like it's odd for the past while. It's just felt something extremely special. Like the whole season just feels like this big massive orb of positivity. So the next question is, so I said best player, right? That's best. Favourite player is different. Who's your favourite player?
Well, to be fair, I could easily give the same answer. I could easily say Tierney again for all the reasons you went over. The fact that he is one of us, and he's so good, and you just feel like he is just a fan on the park. But I've enjoyed watching Scott Brown this season. Obviously Sinclair and Dembele take a lot of the headlines, and I'm not trying to say they've not been excellent, they've not been brilliant, they've not been match winners at times, but watching Scott Brown compared to last season has been absolutely brilliant. Just how he's controlled big games, even in Europe. At Ibrox he's been absolutely phenomenal. Even at the cup final, people forget it. I don't know if he got man of the match against Aberdeen, but it was absolutely brilliant.
I would agree, Scott Brown has been my favourite player. I was thinking it could have been Lustig or someone like that. You know, there's a lot of players that have come in, and but it's just like Scott Brown. He's just not the same player anymore. He is a completely new player. I'm trying not to say he sounds like a new signing. He's like a new signing because that's the worst chat of all time. But for me, Scott Brown has just, and I was a massive critic of Scott Brown, and I still stand by it. I believe that for large parts of his Celtic career, he was average.
Well, I think most Celtic fans, I think we've had this conversation, I'm not sure if it's on the podcast, but most Celtic fans were doubtful of Scott Brown, especially in the last kind of 24 months, where he just wasn't playing well. He never looked fit, and he just wasn't as effective as you knew he could be.
it's one thing I've actually noticed. I watch a lot of the interviews in the post match. He does always point back to how last season he was injured, and that he always talks about, like, he keeps getting asked what's changed, and he's like, well, we're fitter and the manager's different. So he's basically having a dig at Dyla, in my opinion, which it is what it is. But I mean, Scott Brown, he dictates and controls the game, and it's not just that, he actually seems to be able to pass. I remember Scott Brown's passing in the past was just abysmal. I've seen him kick the ball out of the pitch more than once in one match. Now he's got one of the
passes going like a yard by the guy, and you're thinking, fucking hell, that's just basic.
Now he's one of the tightest passers.
Well, he's one of the Champions League. I think he's got the best passing or interception. One of those good stats.
Completion rate,
in the
I think,
group stages.
I think it's completion rate, but it's mad. Like, we're talking about all these positive things, and players like Tom Rogic, we've not even spoke about him. He's had a great season as well. Also, what I just pointing out the fact that the Scott Brown thing when it came to Rangers and getting booked and all that and getting sent off or whatever, the suspension, and because it was Easter Sunday, there was a delay. Just little things like that make this. It's kind of forgotten, but things like that
causes the hun rage even more, which is very enjoyable.
It was extremely enjoyable. So I just want to ask a couple more questions before we finish here. What part of the pitch are Celtic strongest? The defence, mid, or in forward?
It's a hard question to answer, because I think we've got obvious strengths in all those positions and obvious weaknesses. I think that the real strength that this team has is that we defend and attack as a team. I think we can't talk about the defence without really talking about Brown and whoever's playing alongside him, because the protection they give the defence. And in the same way, you can't talk about the forward line because it's one forward, but essentially they get the three attacking midfielders behind them, so you've got four forwards. But obviously those three, again, people would say the midfield. So it's just the full team, the way we seem to attack and defend as a team.
I think one of the things that it just sort of became apparent to me as you're saying that there, while we're talking individually and all these plaudits, we are a team. We're a perfect orchestra of players on the pitch. Everyone's sort of pulling in the same direction, and as I say, there are many big individual performances, but to be honest, they play as a team, which again just highlights to how important and how special this season is up to this point. Obviously, if we lose on Saturday,
when you talk about how strong we're attacking, one of our best attacking options is our left back, who is phenomenal going down the wing.
And even Izagiri on the bench is a more than able. When Izagiri came in for 2 months or 3 months, when as I say, players would come in and out at the right time. Rogic got injured at New Year or at Christmas time, and then McGregor stepped up. And now you can't. You'd be doing a bad thing if you took McGregor out that team. So, aye man, it's just a wild time. Personally, the defence, mid or forward, it's a question I just don't really have the answer for, to be honest. Paddy Roberts, is there anything you want to add about Paddy Roberts? Everyone wants him to stay. Is it going to happen, do you think?
Personally, I'm quite positive with this. I think that Celtic would do everything in our power to keep Roberts, and I would quite confident that he'll be playing for us next season. I think Rodgers has managed him absolutely brilliant this season. Earlier on in the year, I thought he was maybe not getting so much game time because he wasn't our player, and he didn't want to develop him too much and stifle Forrest. But Rodgers talks about game management and season management and things like that. So I think Rodgers has actually held him back, knowing that he could be the player that pushes us on to the invincible season and to win the treble. Because if you look at the last few weeks, his statistics are absolutely through the roof. I think he's got 11 assists in the last 8 games or something crazy. I heard that someone mentioning that. So a lot of times when people get into the last 6 games after the last 5 games, whatever, after the split, the form kind of goes and people aren't really kind of giving it 100%. But I think with the fact that we've got fresh players to bring in, like Roberts, he's hitting peak right now, and I've got a feeling that's deliberate. Rodgers is kind of, I know he was injured, has held him back when he was coming back for his injury, so he'd peaked at this exact point. And I've got a feeling that the cup final on Sunday will be Roberts' game. I've got a feeling he'll absolutely destroy Aberdeen. This is the kind of the games he was born to play in.
Yeah, the form he's on is incredible, as is McGregor's, and even Griffiths to an extent as well. Griffiths' finish is not something I've seen much of, but the Griffiths' finish on Saturday on Sunday, and Roberts to set him up was like the movement in the league that Griffiths gave us.
Where I sit at Parkhead, it's 4-4-5, so it's kind of up the top of the Jock Stein north corner. So when Roberts is attacking in the second half, usually he's down that wing in front of us, and he absolutely terrorises defenders, and it's brilliant to watch. Everyone's standing up, and the crowd are going mad for him now these days, and he's saying that in a lot of interviews, how he'll never feel the love that he feels from the Celtic fans anywhere else. And I don't know why, but I'm just confident that we'll get him. And I don't know if we'll get him on loan for another while, or he'll sign and be away in 18 months, but I've just got a feeling there's more for Patrick Roberts to do at Celtic. And I think Rodgers will be saying to the guys, listen, give us this season, give us a go to the Champions League, to Dembele, to Tierney and to Roberts.
It remains to be seen. I'm not as confident as you. I think that he's done enough for Pep to want him to go there, and I think we've probably built a great player in Roberts, and he will want to go and test himself. But it really depends on what Manchester City want to do. They're going to spend a lot more money again this summer. Everything. It's probably going to be one of those ones. It really depends on other transfers around us and around Manchester City now, who they want to sign, or if they can sign players. There's normally every transfer every summer window. There's sort of a merry-go-round, but it's all reliant on one transfer, sort of kick-starting a chain of events.
Yeah,
the last question,
like Griezmann to Man United or something.
Exactly.
And Atletico Madrid buy someone and it'll kick off. I think Atletico Madrid are going to get Lacazette from Lyon.
Aye.
So that could be the domino effect that you're talking about.
Well, they're actually signing Sandro from Malaga, Barcelona, ex-Barcelona guy. Barcelona made a bit of an arse with letting Sandro and Munir go and bringing in Alcácer for €35 million, who's just not done anything. And Sandro's went down to the south of Spain and banged in a lot of goals and kept Malaga in the La Liga. But that's a whole other podcast for Spanish football. But last question: how do we progress from what we've built this season and take it into next season? What happens?
Well, I think the easy answer is Europe, isn't it? We kind of put a better performance in Europe. We weren't too bad in Europe this season, but I do think there's more to come from the team, and whether that would be finishing third and having a decent run in Europa, or even finishing second, which would be amazing, and that's it. You know, there's also the possibility that next season we could lose the odd game and we could still progress essentially domestically, because losing, you can't gauge progression solely on winning or losing games. It's just how the team evolves, and I'm sure Rodgers will fully understand that, because to go through a season unbeaten is phenomenal, but it's also a bit of a freak occurrence. And there's been games this season where we could have lost. Like there was one at Partick Thistle at home where we missed a penalty and they missed a sitter kind of near the end, and we've seen against Ross County how a dodgy decision can shave points off from you. So the real progression will be with the players individually getting better and improving, and as a team really stamping our authority in Europe, and hopefully getting a few big results in Europe. Yeah,
you're pretty much. I don't know if you saw the interview with Rodgers, but he basically said exactly that. He says, we can still progress next year. The team has shown a lot of growth this year, but even if we lose some games next season, it doesn't mean that we're not progressing. It's all about growing as a team. And personally, when I'm thinking about it, it doesn't have to be an undefeated season. It just has to be, sort of restoring pride again in Europe, taking. Bringing people to Parkhead and giving them a bit of a down, going to these far-flung places that we tend to go to, Azerbaijan, Karaganda and all these sort of places, and actually not being scared of going to these places, because for the past 5 or whatever years, you kind of you get quite nervous about these far-flung places, and you end up, there's a good chance we'll get papped out at the early stages. But with Rodgers, it just seems like a little bit different. I'm really, really intrigued to see how the transfer window pans out. But yeah, so Aberdeen on Saturday, and you are going to, where are you sitting?
I'm actually in Q3, which is kind of up the top tier of the BT stand. I didn't get a ticket from my own book in the first round, but I did get my brother-in-law's, because he's offshore on oil rig, so I had a ticket sorted. And then last week there was a second wave of availability, and I had my mate's login because he's actually away at a wedding, so I managed to get 2 tickets beside each other for me and my dad, so I could give my mate the other ticket. So we're both up in that Q3, which is quite a good seat in the main stand. I think it's where we sat at the Motherwell game a few years ago, and it was like absolutely hurling it down with rain. I think it's the same stand as that, but maybe up the back.
Right.
So okay. pretty good seat. So really looking forward to it.
What's the routine What's happening before it?
I'm working till 1, but I'll be scooting out about 11:30 and then meet my dad and my mate in the pub and get something to eat, probably get a train over to Hampden. And then after the game, I have the father duties. My missus is away to Hendu with most of my family, so I'll be looking after the wee one. But I'm quite happy to be sober for it and remember it all and record it and watch it. I've had a right good run at drink this year with the games at Ibrox and Hampden against the Rangers and that, so I'll give my liver a wee break.
Fair play. I'm going to be going to the Madrid CSC for it. I've been really toying with the idea of booking flights. I've been looking at flights in Skyscanner. It's a free advert, by the way. I've been looking at flights on Skyscanner to come back, and it's like €250 return for a few days. And I kind of had the chance at a ticket, I think, but I couldn't justify the amount of money that would cost me to come over. So it's Madrid CSC with the Emerald guys, which is a brilliant place. But yeah, just to say then, depending on the result, we might just do like a snap podcast on Sunday if we can get a few of us together to talk about it. Result pending. The next podcast we're going to officially release. So this is episode 30. Obviously, we've been doing this for a year now. We're really happy with how it's went. We're going to continue. So no luck, but. The next one we're going to do is Mo Johnston. We're going to talk about the cultural impact his signing had. The signing for another team, a dead team, had. The impact that had on Glasgow as a whole. We're going to talk about that. That'll be out very soon. We've also got a couple of other Know Your Histories coming up, but also we're going to be looking for some suggestions. So if you fancy getting in touch with us, we are at Boys Abroad on Twitter and historyboys@gmail.com. So thanks for downloading, thanks for listening, and cheers.
I used to cop a lot, but never cop no drop. Hold mics like ponytails tight and bobble ops. Stop and stick around, come through and dig the sound of the fly brown 6060 psycho who throws a dick around. Bound to go 3 plat, came to destroy rap. It's an intricate plot of a b-boy strap. Fem stack cats get kidnapped. Then release a statement to the press, let the rest know who did that. Metal fist terrorist, claim responsibility. Broken household name usually set in hostility. What is MF, you silly? I like to take men's to the end for 2 milli. Do-do-do-do-do, that's an audio daily double. Rappers need to fall off just to save me the trouble. Yo, watch your own back, came in and go out alone, black. Stay in the zone, turn H2O to cognac. On doomsday, ever since the womb till I'm back where my brother went, that's what my tumor say. Right above my government doomlay, either unmarked or engraved, hey, who's to say? I wrote this one in BCDC O section. If you don't believe me, go get bagged and checked in. Cell number 17 up under the top bunk. I say this not to be mean, was bad luck a pop junk. Pop the trunk on C-Cypher punk, leave him left scrape, God forbid. If ain't no escape, blame MF tape. Definition super villain, a killer who loved children, one who is well skilled in destruction as well as building. While Sidney Sheldon teaches the trife to be trifer, I'm trading science fiction with my man, a live lifer. A pie piper, holler a rhyme, a dollar and a dime, do his thing, ring around the white collar crime. Get out my face, asking about my case, need toothpaste. Professor Mint, monkey style nigga to death to death. And dope fiends still in their teens. Shook niggas turn witness. Real men's mind their own business. That's the difference between sissy pissy rappers is double dutch. How come I hold a microphone double clutch? COs make rounds, never have ox found on shakedown, lockdown, wet dreams of Fox Brown. On doomsday, ever since the womb till I'm back where my brother went. That's what my tumor say. Right above my government doomlay, either unmarked or engraved, hey, who's to say? Doomsday, ever since the womb till I'm back to the essence, read it off the tomb. Either engraved or unmarked grave, who's to say? Pass the mic like pass the peas like they used to say. Some MFers don't like how Sally walk. I tell y'all fools is hella cool, how ladies from Cali talk. Never let it interfere with the Yeti ghetto slang. Nicknames off nipple and tip of nipples metal fang. Known amongst hoes for the bang bang. Known amongst foes for flow without no talking orangutans. Only gin and tang, guzzle out a rusty tin can. Me and this mic is like yin and yang. Clang, crime don't pay. Listen, youth, it's like me holding up the line at the kissing booth. I took her back to the truck, she was uncool. Spitting all out the sunroof through her missing tooth. But then she has a sexy voice, sound like Jazzy Joyce. So I turned it up faster than a speeding knife. Strong enough to please a wife. Able to drop today's math in the 48 keys of life. Cut the crap for us rap. Touch the mic and get the same thing an A-Rab would do to you for stealing. What the devil? He's on another level. It's a word, no a name. MF, the super villain. Doomsday.
I knew you were the one for me. I swear the whole world could feel you